Before we continue, I just want to take a moment and ask all the writers in the room, our literary hosts, and anybody else who considers yourself a writer, and we're not going to go back and check, I want you to stand, and I want to just celebrate you and give you a round of applause. So if you're a writer, please stand up. Thanks for that. At Penn, as you can tell, we love to celebrate. But we don't celebrate just for the fun of it, or even just to see all of you. We celebrate to propel the defense of free expression worldwide. Tonight's focus is Egypt. For 30 years, Egypt was under the iron rule of Hosni Mubarak. Detentions, arbitrary arrests, rampant corruption. But for Washington, a cruel leader was also a crucial ally. In 2010, then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton told it straight to Mubarak and other Arab leaders, the region's foundations are sinking into sand. You can't cling to the status quo. That sand was slipping faster than anyone knew. A Tunisian fruit seller set himself on fire. His charred body became a symbol for people throughout the region, burned by indulgent and indifferent rulers. We were wrapped to our TVs and our Twitter feeds as millions poured into Cairo's Tahrir Square. They painted signs, penned slogans, posted photos, protested, and proclaimed that nothing short of democracy would do. Mubarak shut down the internet, but he couldn't shut off the will of the people. Washington teetered between giddy and gloomy. Was this the dawn of democracy or the descent of chaos? When the government fell, artists stood up. Dances staged outside the stock exchange. Revolutionary graffiti festooning city streets. A festival of literature, painting, and puppetry on the square outside the presidential palace. But freedom was fleeting. That inspiring film footage we'd all watched on YouTube began to slowly rewind. Flags furling up, graffiti erased, people walking back indoors, a uniformed leader, General Abdel al-Sisi, back at the podium. A revolution vanished. Vanished except in the minds of individuals. Those who came of age to the sound of protests and chants. People like Ahmed Naji. In a different life, he'd be living in Bushwick. He'd be the young novelist with the mustache at tonight's after party. But instead, he's given up his liberty to defend the fading freedoms of 82 million Egyptians. In January, he wrote, "The problem has become not that the regime pursues its opponents, but that it hunts down all signs of life. Culture and art are forbidden." While our government withheld aid from al-Sisi at first, now the funds are flowing again. U.S. officials say we need Egypt's help on ISIS, that these are hard choices. Now, making those hard choices is the work of a government official. That's their role. PEN America's role is different. Our role is as a voice of conscience weighing in on those deliberations, proving that the pragmatism of our government doesn't negate the principles of our people, reminding our leaders that trading away human rights for stability is a fool's bargain. You end up with neither. That is what makes the PEN Barbie Freedom to Write Award so important. Think about it. All of those writers who stood up in the room a minute ago, if you could be put in jail in this country for writing about sex or drugs, we would have a hell of a lot of writers. We'd have to be visiting behind bars. This award is an antidote to impervious strongmen and indifferent peoples. It's a clarion call that throws the weight of the world's greatest writers, publishers, editors, and the entire creative community on the side of freedom, on the side of Ahmed Naji. The legendary Egyptian feminist Nawal al-Saadawi was once told by her jailer, "If I find pen and paper in your cell, it is more dangerous than if I find a gun." Ahmed Naji is continuing to write in his cell. They can deny him even pen and paper, but they cannot deny his imagination. The people of Tahrir Square were demanding not just the right to vote, but the right to paint, to sing, and to write. Creative freedom is what makes societies not just democratic, but dynamic, vibrant, engaging, and alive, and the ways that we love about our home here in New York, and in the ways that people around the world deserve. In a world where a novel can be the basis for a prosecution, where creativity can be a crime, where there are prosecutions of the imagination, a global organization of writers is as essential as a group of lawyers or doctors or diplomats. We all strive to save lives, but for PEN's work to be done, we must not just save a life, but also sustain the life of the mind. More and more, when writers are arrested or murdered, government officials now call us to find out what PEN knows or thinks or can suggest. Sometimes they even listen to our suggestions. More and more writers reach out to us, asking for help in dire circumstances. They know that when they write a provocative scene or take on a controversial theme, PEN is behind them. They know that when their book is seized, their magazine shuttered, their publisher disappeared, PEN is behind them. They know that when they're silenced or excluded because of race or gender or religion or walls built around borders, PEN America is behind them. And thanks to all of you, we've been able to expand our membership, our programs, our resources, our visibility, and our impact to keep up with those rising demands. If there's hope for Egypt's unfinished freedom, it lies with the young and undaunted. Ahmed Naji and his friends. They are the front lines of peaceful change in Egypt, and we are on the supply lines, supplying support, protection, and voice. When I first entered human rights work, I was a little surprised to learn how much emphasis there still was on letters written to prisoners of conscience, something J.K. Rowling, I'm sure, remembers from her days at Amnesty. It seemed so 1970s, but there is no Wi-Fi in jail. That snail mail is a jailed writer's only connectivity. I know two brothers who together spent 3 years in Tehran's dreaded Evin prison. Activists from around the world sent them letters. To this day, they carry around those letters. They bring them to events in a suitcase, and they talk about what it meant in that jail cell to know that they were not alone. A few minutes ago, we honored J.K. Rowling, in part for books that some call fantasy, and she says aren't. And I now want to share something that you might think is a fantasy, but that I believe isn't. Let's take a look up there to the balcony. Now imagine a lone figure who emerges unannounced, dressed for a party, mustache and all. It's Ahmed Naji, smiling and free, carrying a copy of his new novel and a suitcase full of letters he received from all of us. We're going to write those notes in just a minute, and I hope all of you do.